LinkedIn News.
Hey everyone, it's Leah. A few months back, I had Cassie Holmes on the show to talk about her research on better ways to structure our time. Now, Cassie's a professor at UCLA's Anderson School of Management, and she studies the relationship between time and happiness. One of the most valuable things I took away from that conversation was the practice of time tracking and also time crafting. Now, time tracking is an exercise that Cassie came up with to help us figure out how we spend the hours in our day so we can maximize joy and contentment. So today on the show, I want to walk you through a time tracking exercise using my own calendar as an example, and then I want you to try it for yourself. This is so much more than a scheduling exercise. It's a path to identifying what really energizes you and what drains you throughout the day. And if you think you already know the answer, think again. I was pretty surprised by what I uncovered after tracking my own time for a week. So let's jump in right after the break. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. Okay, so if you want to lose weight, you keep a food diary. If you want to get out of debt, for example, you'd record your spending. In the same vein, if you want to invest your time better, one of the most valuable things we have, keeping track of how you're currently spending it is the first step. Once you know where your time goes, you can actually make changes that will help you spend more time on the things that matter and less time on those that don't. And this is how Cassie describes time tracking in her book, Happier Hour: How to Beat Distraction, Expand Your Time, and Focus on What Matters Most. So for the past week, I've been tracking my time in the same way that Cassie recommends, which is in 30-minute increments. And here's the important part. For each activity you do, she wants you to check in with yourself about how happy you feel. Now, you can do this either during or after the activity, but the important thing is to assign a number between 1 and 10 about how happy you are, with 1 being not happy at all and 10 being really happy. Now, I do have a quick note on using happiness as your primary unit of measurement here. So for me, happiness doesn't quite capture what's most important. I know from the many conversations that I've had on this show that happiness is an emotion. It's fleeting. It's temporary in nature. So basically, it's impossible to achieve a lasting state of happiness, which means that if happiness is your goal, you're almost guaranteed to fail. Also, something can satisfy you but not make you happy, like a really good challenge. So with all of this in mind, I chose to rate each activity I did in a day on an energy scale, with 1 being the most draining and 10 being the most energizing. But if happiness resonates with you, obviously, by all means, use that as a measure to compare all of the things you do throughout the day. If it doesn't, you can try using energy, or maybe it's purpose, how purposeful you feel in each activity. It could also be meaning, satisfaction, or something else entirely. Now, before I go any further, I want to play a little bit of my conversation with Cassie to help ground you in the research behind time tracking.
We looked at what's the relationship between the amount of discretionary time people have and their happiness. And we analyzed data from the American Time Use Survey. So it captures among tens of thousands of working and non-working Americans how they spend their regular day. And with that, we could calculate how much time they spend on discretionary activities and relate that to their reported life satisfaction. And what we found is the data looks like an inverted U shape. It's like a rainbow or an arc where happiness goes down on both ends of the spectrum. So we see that, yes, those with too little time in this data set, those with less than approximately 2 hours of discretionary time in the day were less happy. Those are the time poor amongst us, and that's because they feel stressed. But what was interesting was the other end of the spectrum. We saw that happiness went down too, suggesting that there's such thing as having too much time. In this data set, it was those with more than approximately 5 hours of discretionary time in the day were less happy. And that was because of lower sense of productivity. that these people felt less productive and a lower sense of purpose. And from that, they feel less satisfied. Now, I will say that those who had a lot of discretionary time, but spent that time in really sort of fulfilling, enriching, almost quote unquote productive ways, that they did volunteer work, or they engaged in a hobby that was enriching and personally developing, or actually really investing in their relationships, you didn't see this drop off. It's not that more and more time was better. But what this points to is that there's this wide sort of swath in the middle of between 2 and 5 hours of discretionary time where the relationship is flat. And so for happiness or satisfaction, it's not about so much how much time you have available. It's really, okay, how do we spend the time that we have available? And for that, there are sort of two components of it. One is, okay, what are those activities that I really need to protect my time for or make time for? Those sources of satisfaction, the part of your work that contributes to your sense of purpose, versus those activities that fill your time, but it's not clear why, And they're, even if you dig in and like, is this really worthwhile? And it's not. Or those activities that sort of fill time almost like mindlessly. I have my students track their time. Actually, I suggest folks do this, is over the course of a week, tracking your time, writing down for each half hour, what are you doing? So your activity, and going more specific than work or socializing. But if you're at work, what particular work activity are you doing? Are you in a meeting? Are you, developing a PowerPoint? As importantly as writing what you did, is rating on a 10-point scale. How did you feel? So that coming out of that experience is a true gauge of how satisfying it actually was. And notably, this isn't me asking you, in general, what are those activities that bring you joy? Because we're not honestly all that good at predicting that or sort of even capturing it. This is from your own true experience. What are those activities that are satisfying? What are those activities that are less so? And there's some surprises that show up. So, my students will be like, oh my gosh, these activities that I look forward to as, sort of me time of social media or of watching TV, turning on Netflix at the end of the day. And then they look at their actual ratings. It's like, not only is it not very good, but it's actually pretty middling, if not negative. Or for TV, that first half hour is fun. But hour 1, 2, as you keep, clicking next episode, then people's experience of it actually can get quite negative. Meanwhile, these activities that, we might dread of like exercise, but seeing how it actually made you feel, not only from the activity itself, but the carryover effects, there is a lot of insight we can gain about ourselves of what are those pieces of our week that are sources of energy and joy. And what are those that are perhaps more draining? We also see just how much time we're spending on these various activities. And so for those of us who feel time poor, if you're like, when I did this, I was like, oh my gosh, I spend so much time on email. It takes up my entire life. It not only seems, but on paper, my entire workdays were email. And a lot of them were unhappy. It's like, it's not like I'm going to stop emailing altogether, but then there's sort of other exercises that I talk about of identifying your purpose. Okay, it's like, how can I reframe some of that emailing to be like, it's not really email, it's really about, for me, generating knowledge about what makes people happy because it's about research that I'm doing. Or if I'm emailing with students, disseminating knowledge about what makes people happy. That's worthwhile to me. That's in line with my purpose. But there's a lot of email that isn't. And given that I need to, for my happiness and satisfaction and sort of productivity of have the time for the stuff that matters, then actually maybe it is that I don't go to, inbox 0 and I can feel confident in those choices because I've identified what are those ways of spending that are worthwhile and what are those ways that are less so.
After the break, I'm going to share what I learned after tracking my time, plus some tips on how to create a schedule that is maximally energizing. We'll be back in just a few moments. Before the break, you heard Cassie explain how time tracking works and why it's so useful. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about my own experience with time tracking in hopes that you take something away from this before you try this exercise. So Cassie recommends keeping track of how you spend your time each day for 7 days. But for our purposes, I'm just going to walk through one Monday that's representative of a fairly typical workday for me these days. So last Monday, I woke up at 7:15, and from 7:15 to 7:45, I woke up my daughter Millie and fed her and had some quick, what I call tender time with her, which is where we just get to hang out and I'm not paying attention to the clock or what I have to do later. I rated this a 9 out of 10 because I love getting to start my morning with Millie and with my little family. It's really sweet. It's a quiet time. There's very little interruption, and it means a lot to spend time with her before the day gets started. And the only reason I didn't rate this a 10 out of 10 is because I wish I got more sleep at night in general, but as a new parent, that's kind of not a thing. More on that later. From 9 to 9:30, I commuted to work on the subway, and I rated this as a 6 out of 10 because I was a little bit stressed about the commute. And during that time, I read a book. So using commute time to read or listen to a podcast is actually a strategy that Cassie calls bundling. And it makes the least energizing activities that we all have to do, like commuting or chores around the house, much more enjoyable. So the next time you find yourself dreading something that you must do, like unloading the dishwasher or vacuuming the stairs, try bundling it with something that's hands-free that you can actually enjoy. After getting to the office, I grabbed some breakfast and checked my email until about 10:30. And I get way more emails than I'll ever have time to answer, let alone read. So like Cassie, getting to inbox 0 is actually not something that I strive for. Still, the task of going through my unread messages is not energizing for me, so I rated this a 5 out of 10. But after that, from 11 to 12, I had an interview for a podcast for an upcoming episode that we're doing on how to listen better. Stay tuned for that. And that was really energizing for me. So that's a 9 out of 10 experience. One of my happiest places is being in the studio with a guest, getting to talk about their work and their story and knowing it's going to be shared with you. So it just makes my absolute day. After a quick lunch, I had a 2-hour meeting and I was feeling pretty stressed because we have a deadline to meet. So I rated that as a 4 out of 10. From 2 to 3, I worked on my newsletter, and while I absolutely love writing, sometimes I hit this experience of writer's block, or I just feel like the time is so crunched. So I actually, even though this is typically a happy place, I rated this one a 5 out of 10. And then from 3 to 4, I had some odds and ends work to kind of catch up on that had popped up throughout the day, and that's an easy 7 out of 10. And at 4:45, I started to mobilize to leave the office because I do pick up from daycare, and it's not incredibly close to where I work. So I feel a little bit of stress leaving the office because, as we all know, there's always more to be done. So I did dip down to a 5 out of 10, but by 5:45, I was honestly up to a 10 out of 10. I'd forgotten being tired. I'd forgotten about the stress because I got to pick Millie up and was carrying her home. And the best moment, aside from these morning tender time moments, is getting to see her smile when I pick her up from daycare and she realizes that I'm there. And I'm like, did you forget about me during the day? And it's the moment I realized that no, she did not. I'm also still baby wearing. And so we just really love that. It's such a nice, bonding moment for us, as is the commute home. I will often take a longer route home, so I won't take the train. I'll take the bus or I'll walk just to get that extra time in. And I keep my headphones out. I ignore my phone. And for me, it's just a moment to be with her. And I'll say, especially after having my first baby, thinking about each hour feels much more obvious. I've spent the last few months really tracking my days by last feedings, last diaper changes, and next naps. Now, tracking it as I reconstitute my life at work and as a mother highlights how precious time really is. And I mean, I thought it flew before, but it flies so much faster now. And so I'm much more conscious just about the boundaries I need to have and how I spend my time. I do my best to feel like I'm taking the most advantage of the time I have. But, as someone who is always wanting to get a million things done and often feels like my to-do list is never ending, it's also a good challenge to recognize that it will never all get done. And so as long as I'm doing what's most important to me at this time and what I'm sort of optimizing for right now, then I'm in pretty good shape. When it comes to our time, we have more choice than we realize. It just involves taking a step back and thinking through the options and the priorities, and oftentimes taking an action or making a decision that feels a little bit uncomfortable for the sake of what matters most. When I think about myself, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So my inclination is to say yes in the moment and to worry about how happy others are with me or how much they like me. But I am here to tell you that it's okay to say no. And don't forget that's always an option. Oftentimes, no is actually a yes, right? We're saying no to something to say yes to something else. So it's always a trade-off, but if you are prioritizing what matters, it's the right trade-off. Anyway, I wrapped up my workday a little after 5, and while I'm on my way to daycare, I'll check my email and send some last-minute messages. And I got home around 6:30 p.m. Now, after putting Millie down for a quick nap, I fed our dogs, called my dad. He lives in California, so we're 3 hours apart. So we got to catch up for an hour, and I rated this time frame an 8 out of 10. For me, making time for people in my life who I don't get to see regularly because of distance is super important to me. At 7:15, my husband Tim got home and we did bath time with Miss Millie and put her to bed. And we play this song from Wizard of Oz, which if you're familiar, it's Merry Old Land of Oz. And it goes, ha, 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 ho, 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 couple of la-dee-das. That's how we laugh the day away in the merry old land of Oz. This song has played in my house between 6:30 p.m. and 7:15 at some point on repeat while the entire bath happens for the last 6 months. So this is our life now. And as soon as this song comes on, Millie knows what time it is. So it's really hilarious to see her realize, oh my God, it's bath time, because she loves the bath. She loves it. So again, this is of course one of my favorite times. When we're done with her bath, we then do tender time in her room, which is just, again, hanging out. We'll read to her, and then I put her to bed. And then we got sushi for dinner, and gosh, I missed sushi while I was pregnant. I rate this entire part of my night a 9 out of 10. Again, I just love having this really sweet family time and this really fun, silly routine that gets my baby into a really good mood, and all of us feel generally ready to kind of wind down. I will say there are those nights that she is completely losing her mind, and so I would not rate those nights 9 out of 10, but I got a lucky Monday this time. From 8 to 9:30, we caught up on Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. That was also an 8. And from 9:30 to 10:30, we watched Shark Tank. That's our nightly thing. And I also did some mindless scrolling on my phone, which I rate 6 out of 10. At 10:30, I got ready for bed while Tim took the dogs on their final walk for the day. I rate this an 8 out of 10 because I love my sleep and my skincare routine, to be honest, that I developed while I was on mat leave. Feels like a really nice way to end the day. And then at 10:45, I started my nighttime routine, which is getting into bed with a book and doing some reading until I fall asleep. Okay, so that was time tracking. Now that you're done with that piece, you're ready to actually time craft. So I want you to pull up a 7-day calendar, and you can check out the link in our show notes for the template that Cassie uses, and block out the hours you know you need to allocate for work meetings and other non-negotiable tasks. Whatever time is left after you've blocked that time is yours to craft. Now, to get started, I would review the ratings you gave each of the activities that you log throughout the week. So what did you consistently rate as an 8, a 9, or a 10, and carve out time for these activities next, because this is the time that's most important for you to protect. For me, it's my interviews with guests. It's my time with my production team. It's, of course, also the morning to connect with Millie, and bath time in the evening with Millie and Tim for us to be together as a family. I'll be honest, in the past, sometimes it's been a challenge for me to meditate in the mornings because my mind is already racing, thinking about every single thing I have to do that day once I get to the office. But after tracking and crafting my time, I know that the first hour of my day is for my newborn baby. It is for Millie. There's nothing else I need to be doing right then because the things I have to do are already accounted for. I've already set aside time in my day to do them, and if I don't get to them, it's okay. What I know is I want to be, and I choose to be, fully present for Millie in the morning. I don't have to think about anything else, and that is the beauty of exercises like this. So go try it for yourself and tell me how it goes. Send us an email at everydaybetter@linkedin.com. That's everydaybetter@linkedin.com. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. Tim Boland mixed our show. We get additional support from Alex Kudziantsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief and vice president of content development at LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.